Let's take a look at the number 5 foot on the Bernina. This is the blind hem foot. So the blind hem foot is got a guide on it. It is very closely related in shape to the edge stitch foot or the top stitch foot, which is a foot I use quite a bit. So in a pinch, you can sneak the number 5 blind hem foot as your top stitching foot, but it does have this at the bottom, it does have this long guide that runs all the way down through the center of the foot, which is not always ideal for certain types of top stitching. So the number 10 is better for that particular use, but this is the blind hem foot and it does have this long center guide. So I'll show you how we use that. The blind hem stitch on the sewing machine on the Bernina, it's the number 7. So it kind of looks like a zigzag, which most of the other stitches do look like zigzags. It's got a couple stitches in between, so it kind of does a zigzag stitch to the left every few stitches. So I believe it does 4 stitches and then it zigzags to the side and then comes back in. So let's pop the foot on. And I think the tricky thing with the blind hem stitch on the sewing machine is that it requires you to set up your fabric in a very specific way in order to make the blind hem. So for the blind hem, what we're going to be doing, if this is our fabric here, we're going to fold our fabric. Let's say we're making the hem of a skirt. So we would be folding our hem back. And let's say this is what we wanted our hem, sort of where we wanted our hem to be. I'm just gonna do a finger press here. And so there is our hem. If you can see, that's what we want it to look like. We want it to stitch like this. A normal hem that we might sew, we would just stitch right along the top here, like a top stitch, and you would see that line of stitching. I could use a matching thread, but it would be visible. The idea with the blind hem is we're actually going to sew on the inside, and it's meant to look invisible from the front. So we're not going to see the stitching on the front. It's all going to be inside with a little bit of stitching coming out here. I'm going to leave my contrasting thread on just so you can really see what's happening. And just knowing that if you do this correctly with a thread that matches your garment, then you can get an invisible blind hem. Some folks also use a clear thread. So if you look at some of your fancier garments that do have a blind hem, you'll notice that they use a very fine clear thread, and that also obviously would disappear really nicely into your fabric and be more invisible. So the little trick here is the way that we fold the fabric. So we want to sew on the inside edge. We're going to fold the hem of the fabric back, and then we're going to be sewing here. So what I want to just show you is I'm going to set up my number 7 stitch right there. And then I'm just going to hand crank the wheel so you can see the formation that the stitch is taking. And you can see here, it suggests that we use the number 5 foot, which we are. So it stitches a stitch, 2 stitches on the right side, another stitch on the right side, and one last final stitch on the right side. And then it's going to, 5 stitches, and then it's going to jump over to the left. So what we want to do here is we're setting up our fabric so that this fold back. So we've got our hem and then we're folding back the hem. So this is the inside, this is still the inside of the garment. And then we're sliding this fold back to sit right beside the guide. So this is the key to this stitch here. Let's get a little bit closer. So we can see here, I've got my fabric sort of folded back. The fold is resting beside the edge of the fabric. And now what I want to do here, and some blind hem feet are adjustable. I will show you what that looks like, but some feet will have a little screw here so you can move the guide back and forth, and that allows you to manage the stitch. So the idea with this stitch is that we're going to be stitching into this part of the hem. So this is the back of the hem. That's not the outside of the skirt. It's going to stitch a bunch of stitches here, and then every 5 stitches, it's going to take a little jump, a zigzag, into the fabric, the hem, And what we ideally want to do is just grab the tiniest bit, a little tiny stitch there, and then it comes back over. And every time it jumps over to the side, it's just grabbing just the tiniest amount. So this is what you need to adjust. This is the tricky part of the blind hem is number one, getting the fold right, but then number two, getting the positioning right of the foot and the needle. So I can see here as it jumps down, it's actually hitting my fold. So that's what I wanted to make sure was happening. I think that's good. So let's just stitch it out and see what it looks like, and then we can talk about how we would adjust it. So I've done my first stitch there. Then it's going to take a couple of stitches, 3, 4, 5 stitches on the side, then it jumps back over. And the key is that it's got to be catching that fold when it pops over. When it pops over, I'm just going to pull out. Got a little thread. Again, you want to avoid having any threads tangling up under your work when you're doing stuff like this. So let's try to get that out of the way. Put my needle down and lift my foot up out of the way. And then let's just carry on. You can see that maybe didn't. There we go. Okay. Oh, good. So it's catching pretty well. And then when we get to the end, we'll just take a look here. So let's take a look at what it looks like. So you can see it's stitching all the way down here. It just jumps over into the fold. And ideally, I think I've caught all of them except for this one right here. So that's not bad. It's caught a tiny little bit. Nice. So you can see that it's caught all of the stitches except for one, which is actually pretty good. And it's basically just biting into that bit of the tiny bit of the hem. And so that's what it looks like on the back. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this back. So this is really the front of the skirt. And so actually I did pretty well. So if you look here from the front side, if this was a matching blue thread, if this was a perfectly matched blue thread, that would be really nice. You would press this out and it would just be just the tiny little bite of thread in there. And the nice thing about the blind hem is that it's quite a strong hem. So even though I missed that one spot, I probably would be like, that's okay. It is fairly strong hemline and it gives you a really clean finish. So all you want to do for the blind hem is just practice and get a matching thread and just do a little sample, and then you should be good. It's a really satisfying stitch once you learn how to do it, once you figure out the positioning. The trick with this is that every fabric may require a little bit of finessing in terms of the positioning. So what you can do if you're catching too much, so the thing to figure out is if you're catching too much fabric, if your needle is going too far into the fold, then you can, on the adjustable machines where it's got a screw, you can just adjust the guide so that it's bringing the guide back to the side. So you can move the guide over so that the foot moves in the direction that you want it to go in. Or in the case of this, which is not an adjustable foot, if I made the stitch skinnier, then it would hit a little bit less. So in this particular case, it was actually pretty bang on in terms of the width, but if I needed to either make it wider to go further, or if I needed to make the stitch skinnier, that's how you would adjust catching the right amount of fabric. And this is a fairly thin Kona cotton, but if you were using something a bit heavier, you may need to adjust this stitch width to be maybe most likely a little bit wider. So that is the blind hem stitch. It's a fun stitch to try and learn. The trickiest part, I think, is number one, just figuring out how to fold it properly. So you do your hem and then you fold the hem back and then you're going to stitch here. So if you look at it like that, I always look at it sort of at this angle. So it kind of looks like almost like a little S, a backwards S. And that is the blind hem foot. I hope you'll try it. It's a fun stitch to learn how to use. It's a fun foot to learn how to use.